So, hot take time. Mario Kart 8 is really friggin' fun. It's a game that I've spent a pretty decent amount of time on, probably playing about a race or 2,000, but it's undeniable that this game has been wildly successful in its nearly 10-year-long run, which really bothers me. In early 2022, it was announced that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was getting yet another DLC run, featuring 6 waves with 8 tracks a pop, totaling into 48 more goddamn tracks. And as you can imagine, every single Mario Kart act across the world had largely the exact same reaction.
Wow! 6! 48!
I also reacted like that, but I was too much of a wuss to actually upload it on here.
But I did upload a video shortly after the release of the first wave, citing that it was far and away the best $25 I've ever spent. And approximately 616 days later, I still agree. If you want to know my immediate reactions to the Booster Course Pass, that video was the place to find it. And if you just so happened to watch that video and completely bask in how well made and professional the whole thing was, this is my first time playing through all 3 of the tour courses featured, and I gotta say, you might have gotten the impression that I had a very high opinion of this expansion. But now that we have all 6 waves and have finally gotten to play all 48 of the courses, my opinion of this expansion has not only risen, but it's risen to such a degree to where I can confidently say that this is one of the best deals in gaming right now. It's still the best $25 I've ever spent on anything. And you'd be surprised how much stupid garbage I paid $25 for. I was really looking forward to finally put this video together. Revisiting the Booster Course Pass was something that I always had intentions of doing, but seeing how well done a lot of these course remasters were and how many new features that they added, there were just so many moments while playing through these waves where I was so surprised, caught off guard, and just smiling and giggling like an 8-year-old again. This honestly was some of the most fun I've ever had with a Mario Kart related thing since the OG game came out. And I'm just so incredibly excited to finally talk about all of these tracks and additions and characters and features and all the things that this expansion delivers on. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, nerds and geeks, and all my queer and non-binary peeps, let's return to the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass. Yeah, so I'm gonna kinda cheat a little bit here. A good few number of my thoughts have changed a bit since the wave first dropped, and I feel like it's important to establish what I think of them now compared to the other waves. It really is all in the name for consistency, but with that out of the way, Wave 1 looking back was pretty bare bones, and I mean that in both a good and a bad way. It's much easier now to see the various corners that were cut with this wave. I did a microscopic amount of research on this, but many of the same people who worked on Mario Kart Tour returned to make this DLC expansion. And it definitely shows. As I said in the last video on this topic, I do think that the more simpler Tour-styled graphics was an intentional aesthetical design choice. A choice which, in my opinion, pays off for the most part. The thing is that for the first wave especially, it definitely seems like for some, not all, but some of the tracks, all they were doing was just taking the assets from Tour and plopping them into Mario Kart 8 with very minor visual enhancements, or sometimes no enhancements at all. And when it comes to these tracks and their visuals, that's something you always hear about. And really, no matter which way you cut it, these tracks simply aren't up to snuff with how beautiful and detailed the tracks of the base game are. But something I don't actually see a lot of people talk about is the music and how godly the score is. This is a key element for why I specifically get so excited to see which courses are going to return, because oftentimes I get just as excited hearing the remixes of the courses as I do playing the courses themselves. And even though there are a few misses here and there, a lot of the remixes are hood classics. But I feel like that's enough dilly-dallying. Let's run over the courses one more time, as in hindsight, completely ignoring the graphics, this was a pretty strong way to start. Now, I honestly don't really know how to structure these bits, so I'm just gonna list my favorite tracks and go from there. But with that being said, the remasters I thought were the most well done were Choco Mountain, Coconut Mall, and Shroom Ridge. Most of my opinions of these courses haven't really changed all that much. I'm still a really huge fan of what they did with Choco Mountain, and that remix still goes crazy. And Shroom Ridge and Coconut Mall were already some of my personal favorite tracks in the series that were now beautifully translated into Mario Kart 8, again with fantastic remixes to boot. Each wave of this expansion would also introduce 2 tour courses, and this wave is a debut of both Tokyo Blur and Paris Promenade. Now, the cool thing with these tracks is that they introduce this new idea of the course changing as the race goes on, which is, in my opinion, one of the best additions ever added into this entire series, and they're used to really great effect in both of these stages. But other than that, both tracks are pretty solid. Not too much I can really add in terms of that. Like a majority of the tour courses, I have zero prior experience with them, so they functioned as entirely new tracks, and they were very enjoyable, albeit very basic. Now, I want to talk about the 2 stages that my mind has completely changed on, that being Sky Garden and Ninja Hideaway. These are both tracks that I flat out don't like anymore. However, the reasons why are vastly different between both of the courses. Now, at the time that it first came out, I actually praised Sky Garden for being the most altered course in the entire wave, but that can only get you so far when the stage is much shorter and has a much better alternative in the base game, and both of those things cause the stage to be rather bland and forgettable in comparison. And for Ninja Hideaway, even a few days after I posted the first Boost Course Pass video, my opinion of the stage dropped sharply, and it's all due to how the course is designed. Like, I still think that it has some very strong elements, like with the alternate routes, but that can only help so much when there's so many sharp turns that come out of nowhere and the track itself just being so damn janky. I should probably set this straight now, but I was playing through all of the courses in the expansion on 200cc, so maybe these issues only apply to that game mode, but even still, every other course in this expansion was completely fine while I played this way, so I don't even really think that is a valid excuse. I don't know, in my opinion, this is one of my least favorite tracks in the entire pass. I'm sorry, I know a lot of people really love this course, but I don't like it. But that's pretty much all of Wave 1, and things can definitely go up from here. Again, it's a lot more easier for me to be more critical given the other waves, but when you get down to it, I still think that Wave 1 was a very solid way to kick things off. And you will hopefully see by the time that this monster of a video is done, the quality of these remasters are only going to improve as the waves go on. And I feel like no other wave demonstrates this better than Wave 2. Now, from what I personally remember, the wait for Wave 2 was long. It was speculated by many people that these waves would come out every 3 months to coincide with the spring, summer, and winters of their respective years. But going from Wave 1 to 2, Nintendo had us waiting nearly 5 months for these tracks, and making it even worse is that there was barely any news about it. Now, waiting for the other waves wasn't that much better in hindsight, but at least we still got little previews of what's to come thanks to brief Nintendo Direct headline segments, something that, from what I remember, Wave 2 never got. So yeah, they pretty much just left us in the dark for 5 months, and I especially was starting to get a bit impatient. But alas, August 4th finally came, and Wave 2 was finally available to the public, and even after my first couple of moments with it, I can already tell that it was definitely worth the wait. The visual jump from Wave 1 to 2 was insane. Now, the mobile gaming look still hasn't entirely gone away, as a few tracks, again, look like they were pulled straight from Tour with very little upgrades. But honestly, way more of the tracks look so much nicer and visually pleasing, as well as having just that slight bit more vibrancy. But like with all these waves, the most exciting thing about them is the courses that were chosen, and almost all of them were incredible. Keyword being almost. To start with the remastered courses, my personal favorites from this wave would be Calamari Desert, Snowland, Mushroom Gorge, and obviously Waluigi Pinball. I find that all these stages look the part and are largely unchanged from the previous iterations, but honestly, Snowland and Calamari Desert impressed me the absolute most, as the former is drastically different with tons more interesting track design elements, and the latter actually adds the ability to drive on the train tracks and having the tunnel section from the original be part of the actual track now. Like, that section completely caught me off guard, and I was just so happy that they actually integrated this weird fan conspiracy theory into the actual track. To be honest, I can't really say much about Mushroom Gorge or Waluigi Pinball, as they're pretty much one-to-one, but I did notice the fact that Mushroom Gorge didn't have an original remix. Come on, what the hell, guys? But anyways, as for the tour courses featured in this wave, we got New York Minute and Sydney Sprint. Now, New York Minute was the only tour track that I had previous experience with, which really isn't saying much because that's the course that the game launched with, but I was still happy to see this one come back, and I was actually quite surprised at how much of this track I could actually remember, even if a majority of what I was seeing was still pretty new to me. However, Sydney Sprint, it was alright. It was a very nice looking course, and the music was very delightful, but in all honesty, I don't really remember much about the course. Nothing about it really stands out to me, and it feels like just another tour track more so than any of the others. But speaking of tracks that are kind of bland, Mario Circuit 3. Again. Well, why is this course in 3 goddamn Mario Kart games? It's like the worst one. And surprising absolutely no one, it's still the painfully basic track it has always been, with a grand total of 0 changes made to it. Can't really say much more than that about it, to be honest. It's just Mario Circuit 3. Again. Have fun. But finally, we get down to the very last course within this wave, Sky High Sundae, a course which, unlike Ninja Highway, was actually made from the ground up for Mario Kart 8. First thing that came to mind when I saw this track, Fall Guys, and like, you cannot tell me that the design of this track was not at least a little bit inspired by it, especially with sections like this. Like, come on. But yeah, otherwise, Sky High Sundae is another solid track. The aesthetic is very creative and actually takes a different take from Sweet Sweet Mountain from the base game, without just being a lesser version of that theme. I guess for Mario Kart 8 standards, the course layout is pretty basic, but aside from that, this track is still pretty neat, in my opinion. So yeah, that was Wave 2, and is unquestionably a step above the first one. The visuals keep improving, the presentation keeps improving. Sure, it has a couple flip-flops in there, it's nowhere near the best one, but this is unquestionably a step in the right direction, and thankfully, the rest of the waves carry that same momentum and runs with it, especially Wave 3. I remember when the initial preview for Wave 3 was shown off at Nintendo Direct, and admittedly I wasn't that excited for it. For one, it started off by showing Peach Gardens, one of my least favorite DS courses, and then it showed off this winter themed track, which also didn't really grab my attention. I did stay optimistic, of course. I mean, it was only 2 tracks, and luckily, not too long after, the official trailer for Wave 3 dropped, and I'm telling you, as soon as I heard 3S Rainbow Road, I was losing it. I watched the trailer while I was still in school during study hall, and the amount of times I wanted to scream was kind of embarrassing actually. But no, like, everything from the courses chosen to the vastly improved visuals had me stoked. And when December 7th finally rolled around, I played both cups featured over and over and over again. I don't know, just something about this wave struck a chord deep within me. And up until recently, I consider this to be my favorite wave in the entire expansion. However, something that I had absolutely no idea going into this wave was the fact that on top of adding new courses, they were also straight up updating the game. For the release of Wave 3, Nintendo out of nowhere decided to add a toggle menu for every item in the game. Ever wanted to play Mario Kart with only bullet bills? How about Starman? Or even... To this day, I have no idea why they added this. I mean, it's not like the item balance was much more broken than it usually is, but I really like that they added this as it gives an already replayable game just that slight bit more replay value. However, other than that, it's pretty much business as usual for this wave. Like in Wave 2, I'm happy to report that the visuals are even better here. None of the tracks featured here look cheap or overly simplistic, and they all have noticeably more detail, really setting in how much the team is improving. But I really don't want to beat around the bush anymore. I just have to gush about how awesome the track selection is because my god, they are all fantastic. Picking a favorite track from the selection is very, very difficult because they're all so good. I mean, right off the bat, it includes Maple Treeway, Rock Mountain, and 3DS Rainbow Road. Some of my favorite tracks in the entire franchise, and they're all perfect here. Not much about any of them have been changed, thankfully. The things that are mostly different just amount to new anti-gravity sections within the course. And this is just me nitpicking here, but it still saddens me to see that the remaster of Maple Treeway is derivative of the 7 version, which means no bouncy net. Again. But really, in terms of looks, design, and physics, these are some of the best versions of these courses hands down. London and Berlin are the new tour tracks featured in this wave, and they're both really, really fun. They're not that flashy in terms of their distinct landmarks like some of the other tour tracks, but their design is super well done, especially Berlin Byways. And I can't stress this enough, but the music in this expansion is awesome, and the music that plays in these two tracks especially goes crazy. I was humming the theme of Berlin all the damn time back then. It's just such a bop. Peach Gardens was a huge surprise to me, given that it's probably one of my least favorite courses from DS and Wii. Even if the design itself is still virtually unchanged, this course does that thing that the other tour courses do where the third lap has you going backwards, which greatly benefits this track. It's pretty much the same approach that they took with Calamari Desert, and as a result, my opinion of both of those courses has changed completely. I'm dead serious, this is one of my favorite courses in the entire game now. I'd say I'd like it just as much as this wave's completely new track, Merry Mountain. To be honest, the aesthetic of this course is probably my favorite thing about it. The track is really well designed with shortcuts and alternate routes aplenty, but I just love how this course fully embraces the Christmas time aesthetic with presents everywhere and this magical train that flies around. I don't know, I just really like Christmas themed levels, they're really cool, and thankfully, this one is no exception. Don't know what else to really say other than that. And honestly, the only track that I would say is kinda from this wave would be Boo Lake. Similarly to Snowland, this remaster has received the most amount of changes from its original version, and it also looks like a boo-infested lake. Yay! Like, I just want to get this out of the way right now. The track itself is still really good, but in comparison to the quality of the others, it's not really even fair. Something about it just doesn't hit as hard, nor does it have the same creativity as the rest of the wave. It's still a really solid track altogether, but it's not one of the first tracks I would ever choose to revisit. But no, like in all honesty, Boo Lake is the worst that any of the Wave 3 courses get. And if your worst course is like a B, B-, that's still really good. I can say with certainty after replaying these courses that I had a good time with all of them. They were all well designed, they were all pretty, almost half of them were some of my favorite courses already. There's not really much I could say that I dislike about Wave 3, and the fact that I could play these courses and get assaulted by like 50 blue shells is pure bliss to me. Now, after playing and replaying these courses again, I can confidently say that Wave 4 is probably the one that I'm the most mixed on. That doesn't mean that I think it's bad or necessarily worse than the other waves, but my tone about it changes quite a bit depending on my mood. Like in Wave 3, I popped off at a lot of the courses featured, as this wave was bringing back some of my all-time favorites. And also like in Wave 3, the graphics just kept on getting better. And actually, this time, I think I can kind of put my finger on why that is. The textures. This unfortunately doesn't reign true for all the tracks, but I noticed that in this wave especially, a lot more of the track elements have actual textures, which altogether makes them a lot more pleasing to look at. Granted, some buildings and things like the grass could really use some of that, but given how you're almost always zooming by those things anyway, it really isn't that noticeable, so I don't really care that much. However, the biggest surprise of Wave 4 was the fact that they were starting to add new characters into the game thanks to the inclusion of Birdo, which, like the item toggle in the last wave, was huge. I remember when the DLC was first announced for this game, people were kind of disappointed that there weren't going to be any new characters, especially with how ridiculous Tor's roster was. So, the fact that they were able to address probably the biggest issue with the Booster Course Pass is super commendable. But anyways, I really want to touch upon the actual tracks, because given how incredible the selection was, the reason why I said that I was the most mixed about this one was because, my goodness, all of these tracks are so different in quality. I would have to say that my favorite tracks of this wave would be Singapore Speedway, Waluigi Stadium, and unsurprisingly DK Summit. I've noticed that Singapore has started to become a fan favorite, and for very good reason. There are so many cool landmarks, it looks visually immaculate, and it has an absolute earworm of a music track. To be honest, I can repeat a lot of those same things for the remaster of Waluigi Stadium, now coming equipped with completely new shortcuts that take advantage of the new anti-grav ramps. I don't know, like I still think I prefer the atmosphere of the original, but this is far and away the better track in terms of design. But seriously, both of these are some of the best stages in the entire game, hands down. But then we have stages like Bangkok, which is yet another one of the best tour tracks with its incredibly memorable landmarks and stellar atmosphere. DS Mario Circuit, which was definitely an odd choice, but was quickly forgiven upon seeing the new forest portion and the simple fact that the track was just a lot more fun than I remember. And Riverside Park is yet another gorgeous GBA remaster with tons more elevation as well as an all-new cave segment towards the end of the track. But then we get to DK Summit, my personal favorite Mario Kart track of all time. Now, with that information, you could probably guess that I was extremely ecstatic to see it get brought back. And while I still had an absolute blast both playing it for the first time and playing it again for this video, I've always had my little quirks and nitpicks, like how the track no longer starts in a blizzard and gets clearer as the race goes on like it did in the original, or how, in comparison to the other snow courses in the game, DK Summit looks pretty bland and generic. Like comparing it to a stage like Mount Wario, which also has a slope section on top of a bunch of other landmarks, DK Summit just looks like a very generic snow track. All of those things do kinda take the stage down for me, and honestly, while I still do very much enjoy the course, this was one of the more mediocre remasters in my opinion. But if we're talking mediocre courses, look no further than probably my least favorite track in the entire game, Amsterdam Drift. The stage is garbage, plain simple. It's bland, nothing has any life or character to it, the design is horrible with turns jump scaring you all the damn time, the music is incredibly boring, I just don't like it. I don't like it, I'm sorry. Honestly, this might be my least favorite track in the entire game. But although this one isn't as bad, I also don't really care about the Yoshi's Island track either. Now, it could be my intense bias against the character, but I just don't really like how it's designed. I don't like the placements of many of the obstacles, and while I could still admire the attention to detail, like even I smiled when I heard the level clear theme upon finishing up the race, it doesn't make up for how the ideas that this track has just doesn't gel with me. But with that being said, I can totally understand if you adore this course. I mean, just off of looks especially, this track is definitely up there, and if you're a fan of Yoshi, you'll no doubt have a great time on it. But for me, I think I'm good. But collectively, like I said before, this is a very middling wave for me. The highs were incredibly high, and the lows were just plain doo-doo. But it's always hard for me to judge this wave because of all that. But I mean, even with its misses, Wave 4 still features some of the best visuals in the entire pass so far, and brought back my two favorite Mario Kart courses ever, so I really don't think I should be complaining that much. Now, I'm not sure if I was the only person who felt this way, but Wave 5 was kind of the point where my excitement for this expansion was on the decline. I was still looking forward to it, of course, and with the preview trailer especially, I was quite intrigued. The course looked all kinds of stupid, but was a very interesting concept for a stage, and the returning characters that they picked were all awesome. PD Piranha and Kamek were really cool to see come back, but Wiggler from Mario Kart 7 was ridiculously out of left field. I never thought they'd ever see the light of day ever again. But to be totally honest with you, even though I liked what I was seeing, it was starting to set in that it was time for the DLC to start wrapping up. So when we get to dissecting the wave itself, again, it's pretty much business as usual. Although something that did bother me about this wave was how inconsistent these tracks looked. They're nowhere near as bad as in the first wave, but man, it's a total clash between courses that look amazing, courses that look utterly dull, and courses that were somewhere in the middle. This is a real mixed bag in terms of looks, which to me is quite disappointing, because visually, the courses were on such a good streak, and even though there are a couple of courses that keep up that same level of quality, just as many completely drop the ball. However, in regards to the tracks/track selection, again, it's pretty much business as usual, meaning that aside from two glaring exceptions, these courses mostly fit within the quality of the Booster Course Pass so far, and I'm real happy to say that. Athens Dash, Daisy Cruiser, and Squeaky Clean Sprint are probably my big three from this wave. Athens has you gliding above rooftops and weaving in between pillars, both of which I find to be very satisfying to do. Daisy Cruiser might just be my vote for the best looking track in this entire expansion. The lighting and the general look of the course is far beyond the quality I've ever seen in this expansion thus far. And being completely honest, that by itself makes this course a blast to play, even if it's largely unchanged from the version in 7. But Squeaky Clean Sprint, just wow. Wow! Even when this was first shown off in that Nintendo Direct, this course had my attention immediately. But after staying with it for like 4 months now, this is straight up just one of my favorite courses in the entire series. Yeah, I'm being dead serious. The design of this track is as close to perfect as Mario Kart courses get, being this incredibly varied and interesting drive through a goddamn bathroom of all places, while also having many distinct landmarks and locations that make this track feel very memorable. This also extends to probably my favorite shortcut in any Mario Kart game, where you can take an alternate route via getting a boost from toilet water. Or at least I hope that's water, but really, even though this and the other two courses have their flaws, I still think that these are among some of the most well-tuned and memorable of the entire pass. But then again, those are only 3 out of the 8 courses featured, so what about the other 5? Well, how about we get the worst one out the way first. Sunset Wilds isn't good. At all. I never was really a huge Sunset Wilds defender from Super Circuit, but I always appreciated the ideas that it introduced, and I thought that had a very nice aesthetic. But the version that we got in 8 removes all of that. The stage is bland and boring as all hell, the changing of the daylight from the original is completely gone, removing all of the charm from the original course, and the slipperiness of the sand just doesn't make this course fun to play. Like, it's not good, I'm sorry. But honestly, there really isn't any track in Wave 5 that's this low in quality, but they're also none as high as the previous 3. I mean, LA Laps and Vancouver were decent. I like the ice arena from the latter and the construction site from the former, but these tracks are largely just your standard everyday tour courses. They have some cool landmarks and occasionally do some cool things with their design, but for me personally, they don't really do much. Koopa Cape and Moonview Highway on the other hand, while I do still very much enjoy these tracks, these remasterings just don't have that same pizzazz or visual flair that the other returning tracks do. I mean, it's good not to fix anything that's not broken, but that does mean that I inherently have less fun with these courses than something like Waluigi Stadium or even Daisy Cruiser. And this is kind of my whole central issue with Wave 5. A majority of the courses here are still good, and a few of them are fantastic. But it just seems to me like the majority that are good are so without having anything really special about them. It's overall, like I said, business as usual. It maintains that same quality that the other previous waves had, but it doesn't really do much more than that. And finally, on November 9th of this year, the last wave of the Booster Course Pass was released. Now, like in the previous 2 waves, Wave 6 introduces new characters. However, seeing that there were only 2 slots left in the character select screen, it was incredibly shocking to see not 2, not 3, but a whopping 4 additional characters added to the roster. We got Peachette and Pauline, both of which making total sense, and Pauline especially is actually starting to become one of my undisputed mains now. But absolutely none of that matters because Diddy Kong is finally in this bitch. Let's go! It's been a ridiculous amount of time since we last seen him playable, and I'm just so mad. I'm so mad that it took him almost 10 goddamn years to get him in here, but he's finally here and he looks amazing! His animations are perfect, it just... Oh, and Funky's here too, I guess. But in all seriousness, this is probably the best selection of characters they could have gone with. All of these guys and gals look great, their animations are beautiful, and the fact that they faked everyone out with a character roster only to double the amount of characters promised deserves all of my respect. And god, just comparing the complete roster to that of the OG one from 2014, man, contender for the best roster in the series right here. I also want to point out that this wave probably features the most amount of updates that any of the waves have introduced. For one, they added new Mii costumes. A whole bunch of new Mii costumes. There's one based off a dolphin, a Pokey, a Cheep Cheep, among many others, and all of which come equipped with entirely new animations, which is flat out mind-boggling. Did not expect Nintendo to put this much effort into... Did I just... Something else that I found out about via Twitter, screw you Elon Musk, is that there are even updates to the online side of things, as room codes exist. The game's been out for almost 10 years, so to say that this was necessary would be a gigantic understatement. But one of the more smaller, albeit super cute things that was added was an alternate credit sequence when you complete all the DLC courses in Grand Prix mode. More on that later though. So yeah, that's quite a bit of content that was added for this one wave. I mean, it was the last one, so it makes all the sense in the world to pull out all the stops and address pretty much every last issue people had with the Booster Course Pass up until that point. This is easily the biggest wave out of the 6, and I don't know if it's just me, but I was feeling a lot more hyped about this wave in comparison to all the others. I guess the aspect of finality and knowing that this is it for Mario Kart content would be one thing, but literally all of the additional things that they add on top of that made playing through this wave a more fun, exciting, and at some points a more emotional experience. It's because of all of this and more why Wave 6 is by far my favorite wave in the entire pass. And we still haven't talked about the tracks themselves yet. So let's do that. Just putting it out there, a lot of these courses are going down as some of my favorites within the entire game. Madrid Drive, DK Mountain, Rainbow Road, Bowser's Castle 3, Piranha Plant Cove, and Daisy Circuit were all fantastic. In Madrid, you go inside a mall, an art museum that has actual official art inside of it, and a whole ass soccer field featuring the Goomba Shoe enemies from Mario 3. Piranha Plant Cove is an excellent send-off for the brand new tracks of this pass with really solid course design and an awesome aesthetic. DK Mountain's wide turns, gorgeous visuals, and newly added bridge section are all awesome additions that make this stage so much more fun to play. SNES Bowser's Castle 3 completely blew my socks off for how hard they went with the track design, making me actually prefer this to the OG Bowser Castle in the base game. And Wii Rainbow Road is quite the poetic end to this entire thing, having the same polished design, although it is extremely easy in comparison to the original. I don't know, I just found that there are a lot more guardrails than usual in this one, and in 200cc, you can even jump across the middle chasms even without a mushroom. And like, I get it, but at the same time, while this is still hands down one of the best courses in the entire game, you can definitely tell that something was lost. And since we're talking about the negatives now, the two tracks I found to be the weakest in this wave had to be Romavati and Rosalina's Ice World. Now, Rome was actually a pleasant stroll through a nighttime Roman town, although the only thing is that the course design blends in a lot with the other tour tracks. But Rosalina's Ice World, god, what the hell happened here? This course sucks. The camera is so finicky, the ice physics are absolutely horrendous. It's just not a good time. And seeing the abundance of other 3DS courses that they could have picked, this one was one of the very few that I found very, very disappointing. But for real, that might be about it for all my issues with these courses. I mean, I could nitpick them to pieces. I mean, DK Mountain doesn't have Donkey Kong holding the DK cannon sign. Oh my god, guys, the course is ruined! But that doesn't take away from the fact that, collectively, all of these courses are phenomenal to race through. And can I just say that I love the fact that the entire Booster Course Pass expansion ends with a Bowser's Castle and then a Rainbow Road, like how every other Mario Kart game does? Like, it's small and it's stupid and it does not matter, but it just really solidifies the fact that this is it. An almost decade-long run of an incredible game has officially come to a close. Only thing to do now is to watch the credits. Man, I love Mario Kart. That was the underlying thought I had while watching the credits, and when reflecting on my time with the Booster Course Pass, and really Mario Kart 8 in general, it only just further cements my raw passion and love for this entire franchise. The excitement of playing remastered versions of some of my favorite tracks, the wonder of playing through the tour courses for the first time, and the surprise of me actually loving tracks that I've previously used to loathe are probably gonna go down as some of my favorite gaming memories. It's hard for me to put into words the amount of joy and happiness I felt while playing each of these waves as they came out. It truly was the highlight of those respective months for me, and I'm kind of sad that it's all over now. There are still so many tracks that I really would have liked to see get remade and see how they'd play in 200cc. But alas, I think it's now safe to say that the Mario Kart 8 hype cycle is over. But talk about one hell of a legacy to leave behind, man. 96 total courses, 48 characters, 65 million copies sold between both the Wii U and Switch versions, and somehow achieved all of this in nearly 10 years. The Booster Course Pass has solidified Mario Kart 8 as being a legend among legends, and somehow after all this time remains a game that countless people go back to on a consistent basis, which unsurprisingly includes yours truly. One of my favorite games of all time, one of the very best that Nintendo has ever made, and thanks to the Booster Course Pass will be played 10, 15, 20 years from now. The future of the Mario Kart series is actually looking pretty bright as of late, now that both this and Mario Kart Tour have officially closed up. So I'm very hopeful that Mario Kart 9 isn't too much longer away. But honestly, I can make a whole nother video when it comes to that. But for right now, I actually want to go off script a little bit and apologize for disappearing. I brought up this in a community post earlier this week or 2 weeks ago or whenever. But yeah, pretty much all that's really been happening in my neck of the woods is that it's just been a lot of like IRL stuff. Things haven't really been going that well for me as of late. And I just felt like, I mean, like that like was like the primary thing that kind of kept me from uploading on here as much as I would have liked. So I'm sorry about that. But the other thing is that, you know, like there's just a lack of like ideas for the channel. I didn't really know what specifically to cover. And I just kind of took the time to just kind of like brainstorm ideas, you know, think of things I'm both passionate about and things I can actually like add to the table. So yeah, this video on, you know, the Mario Kart 8 DLC was one of them, but I also have a bunch of other things planned for next year. So yeah, unfortunately this is the last video that's going to come out unfortunately this is the last video that's going to come out this year. I apologize for that. But yeah, again, thank you guys for your continued support. It means a lot to me. And yeah, I'll see you on the next one.